Hey everyone, Felipe here. Welcome to another Tower of Saviors GNN news review. This week we have some really exciting news, which is going to be the Supreme Reckoning of the Egyptian Gods. This series really needed an upgrade from a while ago, and Supreme Reckoning hopefully will solve all our issues. And I'm really excited to see what new skills they have and how they will improve the game. So without further ado, let's get started with this week's GNN news. As I said before, we have the Egyptian God Supreme Reckoning. We also have Awakening Recall for the Norse gods as well as the witches, and a new item collecting mission, the Pyramid Activation. So, the meat and potatoes of this GNN is going to be the Supreme Reckoning of the Egyptian God series. And honestly, I really like the new artwork for them, and I'm also really excited to see their skills as well. So after the update maintenance, we will be able to perform Supreme Reckoning on the Egyptian gods, and their leader skill will be as such. For Seth, leader skill, fire members attack times 7, HP and recovery times 2.5, fire members damage dealt to enemies times 10 additionally. Direct damage, active skill dealt to enemies times 3.5 times additionally. Fire and earth damage will have a damage reduction of 50%, and damage will be dealt regardless of attribute relation. My opinion, I think this leader skill is actually not that bad. Times 7 is a little bit low in terms of multiplier for a baseline stat. However, keep in mind that if you are running mono fire teams, which is the specialty of Egyptian gods, a mono attribute team, you get a times 10 team attack bonus that is unconditional as well. So basically, this is a times 70 um, leader skill multiplier, which is actually pretty good as well. And Egyptian gods will share the same leader skill. Just keep in mind that this is going to change their attributes based on the attribute of the Egyptian god. So for Ra, it is going to be light members and light member damage. And instead of fire and earth, it will be light and dark. For water, I assume it's going to be attribute and counter attribute. So water and fire, earth and water, light and dark and light. So honestly, this leader skill by itself is actually pretty good because it lends itself for a mono attribute team, and that is going to be really good. And I do think the multiplier is pretty decent as well. Now we take a look at the team skill because, as you can tell, there's not that much utility built into it. So in harder stages with more enemy skills, they might struggle a little bit. So that's where the team skill is going to come into play. So when both the leader and ally are Tefnut, oh god, are we going to go one by one? Yep, we are going to go one by one. Uh, when both the leader and ally are Tefnut, Beast and God runestones also possess the effect of each other. Water runestones have their effect increased by 200%. Upon the activation of Water Member's skill, damage of Water Members will be dealt regardless of Enchanted Runestone Shield, Initial Shield, and Duo, Trio, Quartet, and Quintet Elemental Shield. Upon the first activation of Tefnut each round, skill CD of that Tefnut minus 6. Um, when there's Tefnut in the team with Anubis and Water Members, when there are only Anubis, Tefnut, Sobek, and Water members in the team, alter the attribute of Anubis into water. Okay, that's pretty good. Presumably, yeah, all of these are going to be Anubis attribute change leader skill, attribute change team skill. So that's a pretty good thing. And honestly, Anubis is an amazing support for Egyptian gods, anyways. So that is going to be a good thing that he can change attributes and benefit from the leader skill. But yeah, so both leader and ally are Seth, Dragon and God runes. Actually, is this the same thing? Yep, this is going to be the same thing except that the race is going to change and the attribute is going to change. But overall, everything else Wait, that is okay. There's a typo here, but overall, everything else is going to stay the same for their team skills. And in my opinion, this is a pretty good team skill. Um, Increasing the effect of light runestones is really good. Upon the activation of a line member skill, you ignore Enchanted Runestone Shield, Initial Shield, and Duo, Trio, Quartet, and Quintet Elemental Shield. And this condition is actually really useful because if you are running a mono attribute team, every single one of your skills will carry this utility, and that is absolutely really powerful. I think the only unfortunate thing is that there is no runestone possession effect. So if you encounter runestone drought or you don't have enough attacking runes of your leader's attribute, it means that you are not going to deal that much damage because your leader skill only boosts your multipliers and your team skill increases the effect of your own attributed runestones. However, if you don't have attributed runestones to begin with, your damage is going to suffer a lot. But overall, in terms of leader skill and team skill, I do think they have really good multipliers and decent team skill. But in general, I don't think they're going to reach a tier 0 status as a leader, mostly because Egyptian gods are mostly a support type of series. Yes, they had really good runs as leaders, especially in ultimate stages like the original Ed stage where you could only deal sniper damage. But in the current meta, I do feel that this leader skill and team skill combination is going to be a little bit average and not super broken because it is usable, it has utility, but I do think that the gameplay doesn't lend itself to harder stages with more of the annoying enemy shields because these team skills they don't have extended runestone movement time, they don't have runestone possession effect, they don't have board debuff nullification. You do have shield breaking potential, but even though you have 6 chances of activating this shield um, breaking effect, you do still rely on activating an active skill. And if you encounter an enemy that resets your skill, that also means that your utility is gone. So it's better to have it inbuilt with no conditions, but I still think having it is better than not having it. But the fact that you have to activate an active skill in order to benefit from it, one, it's nice because you can use it 6 times because you have 6 members and you can activate 6 active skills. But if you're not able to activate your active skills, you are not able to access this utility, and that is going to be really painful as well. One of the saving graces is that your cooldown does get reduced um, each time by -6, so presumably that is going to be a 100% uptime, which means that this utility is also 100% uptime if you can activate skills every round. But yeah, overall, as a leader, I don't think they're super powerful. They will be usable, but I don't think they will be able to challenge the harder stages. But yeah, so next we have the active skills or the SR skill. Oh, actually, we didn't go through here. Both the leader and ally are the same Egyptian gods with Anubis in the team. Craft apparatus will be charged after entering the stage. Anubis will synchronize the attribute with that of the leader, yes. And it will change the condition or active skill to the following. And remember, this is because Anubis normally baseline only buffs your team damage and then buffs only gods. But because Egyptian god cards are different races, they do change their Anubis's active skill to match that. So for example here, drop rate of runestones of the character's attribute increases. So instead of increasing dark as normal Anubis would do, you increase your attribute So once you synchronize, you still benefit from that increased drop rate. Launch one extra non-attribute attack, that's new. Upon skill activation and at the end of the round, yeah, turn runestones of the character's attribute into enchanted god runes. That is also a change because normally it's only dark runes. And skill can be deactivated anytime. And here, team attack and recovery increases by 2, and Egyptian gods skill cooldown -2. Oh, that's actually pretty nice. So one of the good things about Anubis is that he could reduce his cooldown by 2, but now that effect also applies to Egyptian gods, so that is going to be really, really powerful as well. Uh, Less so because you do get a -6 every time you activate it. So actually, what CD are they? They're CD6. So yeah, so this activation and deactivation for Egyptian gods, it's a little bit redundant because you do get a -6 the first time you activate it every round, and if you're careful, you can have 100% uptime. If you mess up, then this is going to be really useful. But overall, I do think that if you're careful and with careful planning, your Egyptian gods should have 100% uptime once their cooldowns are ready. But yeah, we also have the SR skill, which is restore all runes to normal state. That is pretty standard for an SR skill, which is really powerful because you can get rid of a lot of board debuffs. Members of the leader's attribute damage will be dealt regardless of puzzle shield. According to the number of runestones of the leader's attribute upon the completion of the last runestone movement, combo count increases. Okay. Upon the condition of the last runestone movement, so for each runestone of your attribute that's left when you finish moving, your combo will increase from that. Is what I'm getting. For example, if you start moving and there's only 3 light runes for Ra, you get a +3 combo count. So I think that's pretty powerful if you match it with a card that can generate attributive runestones. And I think that is pretty good as well. And this will mitigate a little bit the weakness of shield breaking potential and board debuffs because your SR skill can negate the board debuffs by restoring all runestones to their normal state. Moreover, you ignore puzzle shield, so that's another layer of utility that you get by having your SR skill. This will consume 100% of the craft apparatus power, but that should be pretty easy to get because you do charge your craft apparatus if you have Anubis. And even then, I do think charging your craft apparatus is not that bad, but it's one of those things where if you don't have it ready, it might hurt you when you need it the most. I do think this is a really good SR skill and it does cover up some of the weaknesses that we covered earlier about the leader skill, which means that it makes it a little bit more viable to use as leaders. But I still think that overall, there's a lot of conditions for your utility. Meanwhile, a top tier meta leader would have all these utility inbuilt as passives in its leader skill and team skill without conditions, which means that it is easier to play, more brain dead, and you can clear stages without too much thinking into it. But overall, I do think uh, pretty good leaders, and not that no, they're still pretty viable, but again, they're not tier 0 or super broken. I do think at this point they're a little bit average or even above average, but I don't think that they will be able to clear super hard stages. And that's okay because, like I said before, Egyptian gods are mostly for support, in my opinion. But yeah, for their active skills, they have 2 active skills, CD6 for both. For the first one, we have Explode non-dark runes to deal dark damage to all enemies. Turn all runestones into enchanted runes of the corresponding member's race in each column. For each runestone turned, deal a dark damage of 1 million to all enemies. Oof, wait. Dark members attack and recovery times 2. Okay, that is really really good. Actually, kind of. So the explosion of non-dark runes is going to be really good because one of the weaknesses that we covered before is that you don't have runestone possession effect, which means that you're relying on your own attributive runestones to deal damage. The fact that you can explode everything except your attributive runestones will mean that there's a higher likelihood of you getting more attacking runes and dealing higher damage for that round. That being said, you don't have guarantees, so if your luck is really 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 bad, you might end up with the same number of attacking runes and it didn't really do much for you. But I still think it's a good active skill to explode everything else except your own attribute because there is a higher likelihood of you getting more runes of your attribute and more attacking runes. The other part of the active skill is also really interesting. You turn all runestones into enchanted runes of the corresponding member race. That is going to constitute a little bit of a damage increase for that round, because enchanted runes deal more damage and race runes also deal more damage. Additionally, for each runestone turned into enchanted runes, you deal a dark damage of 1 million to all enemies. And if you turn 30 runes, that is going to be 30 million sniper damage. And keep in mind that if you're running the Egyptian gods as leaders, any sniper damage gets increased by 3.5 times. And that sounds really good. That is going to be 120 million damage, sniper damage to enemies. However, enemies nowadays have above 100 million or have like 500 million, even a billion HP. So even with your 3.5 times damage boost to direct damage from your leader skill, that is going to be 120 million. Actually, if you're running dual leader and ally, that is going to be double that. But even then, it is going to be a good chunk of damage, but it's not going to be useful in most situations because enemies have really tanky HPs nowadays. I think this is going to be one of the better sniper cards that we have and deals more damage as well, because it also comes with utility. So I do think Egyptian Gods will be one of the more powerful sniper cards out there, because not only do they snipe, but they also provide you with utility, and that is going to be really powerful because that means you don't have to completely use up a slot just for a sniper. But I do think that if for running a Egyptian god leader, that sniper damage is going to deal a significant chunk of damage, but in other teams, that sniper damage, it's nice, but it's not enough to make a significant dent on most enemies. And I do think the most of the damage increase that you're gonna get is going to come from this attack and recovery times 2, because it will allow your team to kill the enemy in front of you instead. So overall, a pretty good sniper active skill. And if we follow the train of thought that the Egyptian gods will be mostly support for other teams, I do think it's a good member card. Um, the damage is going to be about 30 million, but if you're running about a dual leader Egyptian god, this is going to be more than 240 million, right? Um, actually, yeah, it will be like 400 million, which is actually pretty significant and not that bad. But still, when you're facing enemies that have 1 billion, 10 billion HP, that is not going to be a lot. But yeah, they do have another active skill though, that is also CD6, and this one will alter the attribute of all enemies into the counter attribute until they are defeated. And wow, that is really powerful. Water members, damage will be dealt regardless of fixed combo shield and defense. Not only do you alter the enemy's attribute permanently, you also deal more damage, and you because it's your counter attribute, and you also get utility to ignore fixed combo shield and defense. Honestly, this second active skill is absolutely amazing, and if you don't know, the reason they do this is because Egyptian gods virtual rebirth, you have two forms. One is the original form, and the other one is divergence. And because they both combine into supreme reckoning, you lose the chance of switching forms. But instead, now you have two active skills, and this is their original active skill, and this is going to be their divergence active skill. And in my opinion, that is better, having one card with two active skills, because you don't have to switch forms outside of battle. You can just bring one card and have both effects available to you. And back to this active skill, I do think it's absolutely amazing because you don't have a time limit on how long you can alter the enemy's attribute. And this comes into play with enemies that have weakness shields, where they only take damage from their weakness attribute, or weakness puzzle shield, where they have a puzzle shield that only breaks with runes on their attribute, and sometimes that gets paired with anti-runestone shield first batch, which means that you do have to change their attributes or ignore the puzzle shield. And because this skill stays until the enemy is defeated, it means that you don't have any time limits, because some cards only alter attributes for one round, and if you don't kill the enemy in that one round, you have to restart or wait until your active skill is ready again. So in my opinion, this second active skill is going to be really good for Egyptian gods, and especially it's more future proof as well, because it can fit into any teams in the future as well. Not only that, you also ignore fixed combo shield and defense, which is a cherry on top of shield breaking added into this active skill. So overall, two pretty solid active skills. They do share between all five Egyptian gods, and I do think it is going to be really powerful as well. But yeah, so overall, I do think this is a much needed upgrade to this series. The artwork is an upgrade, the active skills is an upgrade, and the leader skill is also an upgrade. So I'm really excited for these cards to come into the realm, and I cannot wait to try them out and use them in my teams as well. Yeah, next we have the Awaken and Recall of the Norse gods and the Witches Reborn, and that is interesting because Awaken and Recall normally is reserved for series that are part of the Traveler's Memories. So, for example, we're talking about 12 Zodiacs, we're talking about the Enlightenment series, we're talking about not these Norse gods, but we're talking about the Norse adjutants, like Gondul, or not Gondul, but like the other Norse gods. And we're also talking about Hyakiyagyo. We're talking about, but yeah, basically we're talking about the Traveler's Memories. So it is interesting that it is being added to the Supreme Reckoning Norse gods as well as the witches. I am not complaining because this is a way of buffing old cards, and Awakening Recall is actually one of the mechanics that I really like because it is a passive increase to your abilities, and in most cases it is a very nice upgrade. And the fact that they're putting it on Supreme Reckoning cards also gives us hope that for future cards or for future series that fall off the meta, for example Greek gods, there can be some sort of indirect buff or Awakening Recall that will bring them back into the game. So yeah, really excited about this as well because any upgrade to previous card series is definitely welcome in my book. For the witches, though, it is also very interesting because they just got their virtual rebirth, so not sure why they wanted to buff them again. And there's a issue there where if you buff it too early, once they fall off, that buff will not really have that much impact. I do think buffing a card has the most impact when it already fell off and you buff it to bring it back into the game. But since Virtual Rebirth happened so soon or so recently, I think the witches are already back in the game, so I don't really think they needed an upgrade and they could have saved this for later. But still, I'm not complaining, this is very nice to have. But yeah, for Supreme Reckoning, Norse Gods and Witches Reborn, we will have Awakening Rebirth, Awakening Recall. For Freyr, Water Members, attack basic value plus 350, Water Gods plus 630. By dissolving one group or 5 or more Water Runes, characters attack times 3. Pretty nice, and also the reason why I like Awakening Recall is because they're passive and you don't have to activate an active skill, you don't have to do anything, it just builds into your kit. And one of my favorite cards is AR Gemini, that is a times 6 passive, and that is so much damage. And here, for your Awaken and Recall, we have a times 3 attack bonus, attack basic value of fire members and god members also increases, which makes these cards become really good supports for gods and light members because it it is not tied to you running Norse gods as leaders, they just have to be on the team. And because of that, if you put these cards on your team, you are also indirectly buffing your current meta leaders and other leaders that come in the future. So that is going to be a really nice Awakening Recall, and you also have more damage dealing and attack basic value increase. So this is a nice Awakening Recall in my opinion, because a times 3 attack bonus every round uh, is actually really nice, and the fact that you increase your attack basic value also scales with leader multipliers, so that is also really useful to have and makes them really good support cards in my opinion. Okay, in terms of the witches, oh, okay. In terms of the witches, they have the same awaken and recall. Hmm, interesting. But yeah, so for but why do they do Cassandra like that? Oh, okay. Oh, I see, I see. So, for Cassandra, your recovery basic value increases, and your water human recovery basic value increases more as well. And when there's an additional effect in play, the character's attack times 3. That is also going to be shared between the 3 witches, which is honestly a very easy condition to hit because their active skills is an additional effect, right? But now, for Cassandra, the reason why her recovery basic value increases is because her active skill directly takes from your recovery stat and adds it to your attack. So the higher your recovery stat, the higher her damage boosting effect happens. So this is going to be a really nice buff for her because it will increase the damage that she grants to your team. Same thing for Medea, attack basic value will increase your team's attack, and that is also really good. The HP basic value I don't really get because Circe is more of a combo oriented buffer, so I think that it could have been something like combo increases by 2 or by 3 for each human or something like that. But not complaining about a buff, and this gives you more survivability, so that's also pretty good. So overall, I do think they're very simple awakening recalls, and they're very welcome buffs to these characters. The only thing that I can say is that I do feel that it's a little bit of a safe option for these awakening recalls, because back then awakening recalls would be really interesting, right? For example, um, your cooldown decreases by 2 if you hit a condition. That is AR Sagittarius. For AR Gemini, for each group of 5 or more heart runes, your attack multiplier increases to the max of times 6. If you dissolve a group of 6 dark runes, you poison the enemy. Uh, for Luna, you increase movement time by 1 regardlessly. So in the past, each awakening recall was really interesting and it kind of worked really well. And it was exciting to have different awakening recalls. But in this case, they're all the same with just different conditions, but different attributes. So I do think it's nice, but I feel like they could have gone a little bit more creative with the awaken and recall skills. And that's what I was expecting. So I am a little bit disappointed that they're not creative, but I cannot complain because it's a buff and it is going to make them more viable and more powerful as members in your team. But yeah, those are my thoughts about these awaken and recall skills. Next, we have a new item collecting event. You know the drill by now. Clear stage, collect items, use them in the shop to get different rewards. We do have a puzzle challenge. Interesting. Oh, okay. Wow, that is going to be interesting. You do need to complete the puzzle by moving the runestones around. So definitely bring Dragonware that increases your movement time because that's going to be really useful. And you know, if you have the Yogg-Sothoth Corrupted Craft, that is also going to help you a lot in this game as well. For the challenge mission, we have the new Pyramid boss, which between you and me, this looks like the Genshin Pyramid. But you know, if you don't play Genshin Impact, don't worry about it. But but yeah, this is going to be a light Machina, which makes sense. The artwork screams Machina and has a CD6 effect. The character becomes disabled and no skill and attack can be launched after 6 rounds. During the countdown, the character's attack and recovery times 3, and for 6 rounds the character's damage will be dealt regardless of combo seal. Refresh the protective shield each round. That is interesting, especially for a Machina card. It's not bad. Yeah, it's not bad, but there's not that many Machina cards that have protective shield. And also this is 6 rounds only. It's it is so destructive indeed. You become disabled for after 6 rounds, but during that time your attack and recovery increases by 3 times and deal damage regardless of combo seal. And refresh the protective shield each round. I have mixed feelings about this skill. If you're aiming to clear something fast, this is going to be pretty good for you because you're not going to last for more than 6 rounds. However, if you're dealing with a stage that has more than 6 rounds, that is going to be a little bit harder to use because losing an entire card for the duration of the entire stage is going to hurt a lot. I'm thinking about 50 stage transmigrations, 20 stage transmigrations, things like that, where losing one of your team members is going to be really painful and might as well bring another card that you can use more consistently and activate it every time your cooldown is up. So in my opinion, this card is a little bit under average and I don't really see much use cases for it right now in the meta, especially because there's not that many Machina cards that deal with protective shields. You could use it on a Nulla team as an off race card and refresh your protective shield that way, but I do think there's better ways of refreshing Nulla's protective shield, like generating protector runes or bringing ban, things like that that will not disable one of your team slots permanently after the countdown is over. But yeah, in my opinion, an average card or below average card, still get it um, for your index. But yeah, and we have Treasure of the Tomb. That is going to be a new challenge mission with Mastaba Rider Eras. That is going to be a new challenge stage card and has the following effect: CD6. Explode the columns below the character and the neighboring members to generate enchanted dark runes. For 1 round, attack basic value of the neighboring members will be lowered to 0, and 2.5 times the detected attack will be added to the character's attack basic value. In my opinion, this is one of the this type of active skill is really good as burst damage because you increase your own attack by quite a lot and launch a single hard-hitting attack, such as Nova Leaves, Michael Lucifer, things like that. So this is a little bit less so because um, it only takes the attack basic value of the two neighbors that you have. But even then, I think it is going to be a significant chunk of damage that you can deal. And if you pair it up with a skill sharer, for example, ooh, she's human. The only one that can share is uh, Pilly Puppets. Um, so if you miss that collaboration, it's going to be a little bit more hard. But I do think you can use this card to really good use as a burst damage. There's not that much utility. There's no like ignore initial shield, ignore defense or anything, but I still think she might have some use. Not a lot, but some use in my opinion. But yeah, the explosion is also good, and CD6 is pretty fast, so I do think she is above average, but I do think there's other cards that can replace her, especially in terms of utility and shield breaks for those hard stages in the future as well. But yeah, so next thing is the TOS Battle Pass. We have a new season coming up, and this is going to be a retrain of Basti, and that is going to be fun because she has some Egyptian motifs now, uh, which matches the whole like Egyptian theme that we have going on. But yeah, she is going to be an Earth Beast card, which is kind of weird because Basti is usually a Dark Beast, but interesting choices. With a CD8 skill. For 1 round, only the first batch of runestones can be dissolved. Runestones can be dissolved by aligning 2 or more of them in the first batch. The character's attack increases by 8 times. Damage will be dealt regardless of defense and puzzle shield. When enclosed areas are in play, the character's skill -6. Okay, the first few parts of the skills are really amazing. The first one, not so much because you shoot yourself in the foot in terms of sky drop, and that sometimes is not that great, especially for teams that rely on Skydrop, guaranteed Skydrop to deal a lot of damage. For example, the new Black Gold cards, Shangyu, Silovic, things like that. However, you do mitigate that by using a 2 dissolve, which means that you do get more combos and have a higher likelihood of dissolving more of your runes on the board. Not only that, you have a times 8 self attack boost, which is really good in terms of burst damage, and you also ignore defense and puzzle shield. So in my opinion, pretty solid burst option card, but I do think that regular Basti might be better for certain teams. However, for some teams that don't rely on Skydrop, this 2 dissolve might be really powerful for them. For the last effect, I do think that's a little bit redundant. It is going to be nice if you encounter enclosed areas, but nowadays enclosed areas is a little bit situational, not that common. And even then, enclosed areas, the biggest issue with them is that they limit your schedule. You are only able to dissolve the first batch of runestones, and if you read this skill's first effect, it only allows you to dissolve the first batch of runestones. So even without enclosed areas, you're not getting sky jump. And the only thing that this does is decrease your cooldown by 6, which is nice, but they could have put a better condition for that because enclosed areas is not that common, and you're already limiting your own sky drop, so there's no reason why it has to be enclosed areas. I'm thinking, for example, Silovic gets a buff when there's enclosed areas, but that's because a lot of his damage comes from Skydrop. So because you're losing that Skydrop damage, having a condition with enclosed areas works out. But this one, I don't really think there's a reason for it to trigger when there's enclosed areas. But anyways, the rest of the skill is pretty good. I do recommend going for her in terms of getting the free copy. I do think there's other cards that can be better, especially if you're running teams that rely on Skydrop. If you don't have a team that has a lot of Skydrop, this is going to be a really good card. But if you have a team that relies a lot on Skydrop, this one might not be the best option. Okay, same thing, Battle Pass, yada yada yada, and the new uh, Dragonware, which is going to be the Ankh Scepter, which is only for Earth Beasts. For the Dragonware skill, 1 second extra movement time, character's damage will be dealt regardless of defense, and character's attack times 1.3 additionally. Mm, Honestly, not that great of a craft, so definitely not worth spending money in my opinion, since this craft can only be obtained if you buy the battle pass. Um, yeah, if you buy the actual money battle pass. So not that great of a craft. I mean, usable, but I do think there's better dragonwares out there in the game as well. And last but not least, there are skill adjustments to the fake black gold cards, Egyptian god cards. So Sobek, Kepri, Serket, Horus, and Namer the Pharaoh, right? So before adjustments, turn water, da da da. Okay, turn water into enchanted runes if there's Anubis, da 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 da. If there's Anubis and Tefnut or Tefnut in the team, Anubis and Tefnut enter a hyperstate for 1 round. For 1 round, water members and gods attack and recovery times 1.5. I think. Wow, okay. Not that great of an increase, so I don't think that Sobek will see a lot of play after this. I mean, yeah, Sobek, not so much. Let's see, Kepri, let's see, in proportion to accumulated rounds, turn runestones into fire god runes to the max of 8 runes and a combo count of plus 8. That stays the same. Yep, that stays the same. Okay, the character, Shackles, Anubis, and Seth will launch 5 extra fire attacks. That is the new thing. And damage will be dealt regardless of puzzle shield. Okay, so that is pretty good if the skill is activated when the accumulation reaches the max. Again, 5 extra fire attacks, that is the same, but now it applies to Seth, and you deal damage regardless of puzzle shield. Not sure why you would bring this card as opposed to a card that can break puzzle shield directly, um, because you still need to reach max accumulation, so that's essentially a CD8 for 5 extra attacks and puzzle shield break. There's a lot of cards nowadays that can break puzzle shield and CD6, so might as well bring that instead. Not that great of a buff, honestly. Circuit, let's see. Turn 6 runes into 3 enchanted god runes. If there's Anubis, the skill may be ready for reactivation again. And a attack of 1.5. These are painful to read. They're like skill adjustments, but just barely. Not that great in my opinion. But yeah, um, for Horus, explode columns below all gods to generate or below light members, so that's new. You're not, oh, because Ra is a beast. So definitely include light members and gods to generate enchanted runes of the corresponding members attribute in each column. Not that great either. Yeah, okay, not that great. And then Narmer the Pharaoh, which is typically the better one out of all the Egyptian black gold cards, fake black gold cards. Turn the bottom row into 3 enchanted god runes of each specified attribute, line and heart. Okay, it's the same thing. Turn 4 runestones. Okay, that stays the same. Yeah, if there is Anubis or Osiris in the team, turn all runestones into enchanted god runes of all types and fixed numbers and fixed positions. Nice. If an enemy is defeated, fully recover HP. Okay. Eh. Those. Oh wow, that was a terrible way to end this GNN. The beginning was super exciting. This last part is kinda disappointing. These skill adjustments, I mean, they're slight improvements and it allows them to be played with the other Egyptian cards, which is good because the whole Egyptian theme. But in terms of actual skill adjustments, not that great, not that noticeable, and definitely not that usable in the current meta still. So even though there's some skill adjustments, I don't think they will see that much play anyways. But yeah, that's going to be the end of this week's GNN. So let me recap. We do have the Supreme Reckoning for the Egyptian God cards. Their leader skill, while usable, has really good multipliers, some decent shield break potential, as well as an SR skill that makes up for one of their weaknesses, which is going to be poor debuffs. However, because of the lack of Runestone Possession effect, Runestone Drought will be really painful for them because your damage will be solely relying on your own attributed runestones. In terms of the current meta, I do think as leaders they are going to be above average, but definitely not tier 0 and definitely not going to be super useful when facing harder stages such as nightmare stages or calamitous stages. In terms of their active skills, we have two CD6 active skills that mix both of their virtual rebirth forms into one form and two different active skills. The first one is a very good sniper skill that not only deals sniper damage, but it also explodes non-dark runestones to generate potentially more attacking runes. Not only that, you do get a 2 times attack and recovery boost that is going to be very beneficial for your team in terms of damage output. The second active skill is going to be really powerful as well because it alters the enemy to your counter attribute, which means that you will be dealing more damage, as well as dealing damage regardless of fixed combo shield and defense. Keep in mind that this attribute altering skill is permanent until the enemy is defeated, which is going to be very useful especially for enemies that require you to change their attribute, and this will remove the time limit that you have in order to deal damage to those types of enemies. We do have the Awakening Recall for Norse gods as well as the witches. They are basically just attack boosting Awakening Recalls, so nothing too exciting about that. However, they do give buffs to the entire team, which makes these cards potentially really good member options down the line for future teams as well. I do think that these Awakening Recalls are a little bit safe and they could have gone a little bit more creative, but a buff is a buff and I'm not complaining about it. Last but not least, we do have item collecting events as well as new challenge stages, which with two cards that are pretty good. The pyramid, not so much. I think the pyramid is below average. Treasure of the Tomb Eras is actually pretty average. and also Basti is also going to be pretty average. So, overall, pretty good events. However, there are free to play cards, so definitely worth getting in your inventory for the index and just in case. And lastly, we do have the disappointing end to this GNN news, which is going to be the skill adjustments to the fake black gold Egyptian cards. My opinion, these cards never really saw play, and even with these skill adjustments, they will still never see play. However, it is nice to know that they will still have synergy with the other Egyptian cards in the game. However, like I said before, these cards' active skills are not that great, especially in the current meta. They don't have that much utility, and their effects are kinda weak. So, in my opinion, they will never see play in any form for now. But yeah, that's going to be the end of this GNN news. Please let me know in the comments if I said anything wrong or if I missed out on anything. And as always, stay tuned on my YouTube channel for more Tarot Saviors content. For now, stay safe, stay healthy, and I will see you next time. Bye everyone!
胜利，大师的初心，感动永远铭记。